Do you find yourself looking at your fantasy football roster and kind of just going, because you don't know what to do? Let's talk some Week 9 running backs, starts, and sits. What is going on, YouTube? Jake Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's having a great week out there. Getting ready for Week 9 of the fantasy football season. Down the second half stretch here, trying to make some playoff runs and trying to see who we should start and sit here Week 9 for the running back position. There's a lot of teams on bye this week. You got the Cardinals, Bengals, Colts, Jags, Giants, and Eagles all on bye this week. There's probably some holes in your roster somewhere. Let's see if we can get them filled with some running backs. But before I do, just a quick disclaimer, because of some of the other rants on other channels, I do not think Todd Gurley sucks. Anybody who thinks Todd Gurley sucks really has some looking in the mirror to do, because the dude still had over 30 points. And yes, he took a dive right before the end zone. He did the smart NFL football play, and he still got you over 30 points. He doesn't suck. But for now, let's get into all these matchups, talk about at least one guy on each team, trying to get you guys the most information on some guys who are actually on your rosters, instead of talking about the same guys on every other channel. Let's get into this list. Here we go, Thursday Night Football. We have the epic showdown of the 1-6 Oakland Raiders at the 1-7 San Francisco 49ers. And at the same time, we all said, really, who cares? It's not going to be one of those games that you're really excited to watch unless you live in the Bay Area or have been a fan of these teams for a long time. They're not very good. But we talk about every player on every game. So let's talk about the Oakland Raiders, Doug Martin and Jalen Richard first. On last week's episode, I was a lot higher on Jalen Richard. I said he may get less touches, but may do more with what he actually gets, and that proved to be somewhat true. He only had 2 carries on the ground for 14 yards. However, he added another 8 receptions for 50 yards, plus had 3 receptions called back due to offensive holding penalties, which would have made his day only better. He had 14 fantasy points in PPR leagues, but Doug Martin didn't look bad. I mean, he really didn't. He had 13 carries for 72 yards, no touchdown. I can see Doug Martin being highly touchdown dependent rest of season, and if he doesn't get that touchdown, it's going to be somebody who just causes you to have more gray hair. Personally, I would much rather have Jalen Richard on a weekly basis. So this week, they get to go up against the 20th ranked run defense in the San Francisco 49ers, who last week held David Johnson in check for the most part, only 68 yards rushing on the ground. However, they do allow almost 25.5 points per game to opposing running backs. It's one of these things where if you have somebody on bye and you really have no better options, you could start Doug Martin as a flex. However, I would feel a lot more comfortable, and I have Jalen Richard ranked a lot higher this week than Doug Martin. I think he is definitely the player that you want to own in this backfield, and he's definitely worth a start, at least as a flex play going forward. For the San Francisco 49ers, you have a trio of guys that just make you go, whatever. I mean, you got Matt Breida, who is supposedly dealing with multiple injuries, limited all week in practice, missing practices, and then in week 8, he's kind of a game time decision. What does he do? He comes out there and gets 16 carries. That's more than the other 2 running backs combined in Alfred Morris and Raheem, not quite a must-start Mostert. And where that came from, it's really weird to think about. They were talking about resting Matt Breida, and yet they come out here and give him 16 carries, in which he was very ineffective with. He only ended up with 42 yards, 4 total fantasy points in PPR leagues. Wasn't really effective. Alfred Morris, he only had 6 carries, but had 28 yards, 2 fantasy points. Raheem Mostert, somebody who we kind of expected to take a step forward, with Breida being limited, gets 2 carries for 18 yards. Now it kind of looks like all 3 of these guys are in the mix. It's a Thursday night football game. Breida's already got a questionable tag. They're going up against a great matchup with the Oakland Raiders. Right now they're giving up 27.7 points per game to opposing running backs. The problem? We don't know which running back it's going to be this week. I'm going to avoid all the running backs for the San Francisco 49ers here in week 9. They're all sits for me. First game on Sunday, we have the Bears and the Bills, and this could be the first time in NFL history that we see a fan come out of the stands and play quarterback for an NFL franchise. It could happen in Buffalo. The only quarterbacks they have are Nathan Peterman, and Nathan Peterman is about it. Derek Anderson dealing with an injury. Josh Allen still nursing his elbow injury. There's not a lot of options in Buffalo, and I have the utmost confidence that dude sitting in section 212, 3 beers in, eating a foot-long hot dog could almost outperform Nathan Peterman on any given Sunday, but we're talking running backs. So let's move on to the Chicago Bears. We have Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen. Jordan Howard coming off one of his best games of the season, where he actually saw 22 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown. This is what Jordan Howard needs to be effective. We kind of expected a little bit more of this to start the season, but it didn't go that way. He had 24 carries back in week 3 and then didn't break 14 again. This is something, Jordan Howard's a type of running back that needs the volume to be productive. He's not overly efficient, and he highly, relies on touchdowns. If they can commit to almost 20 carries a game, he's somebody who has that value that we thought he would to start the season. They're going up against the 21st ranked run defense there in Buffalo, who isn't a bad run defense. They are a solid defense. You just saw it on Monday Night Football. They held the Patriots, to a very close game until the fourth quarter. They had a bad week 7. They gave up 219 yards rushing to the Colts, but before that had only allowed over 100 yards twice this season. They're a very solid run defense, but it's going to rely solely on the volume for Jordan Howard. If you have somebody on a bye, he's somebody that, yes, you can throw in there as a flex play. If he can get you those 18 to 22 carries a week, you're going to be happy with Jordan Howard. If he goes out there and gets you 12, you may not be so happy, but I get it. There's a lot of bye weeks. A lot of people are going to be out this week. He's somebody that I would start as a flex play. Tariq Cohen, on the other hand, is somebody who I'll start every single week as a borderline running back too, especially in PPR leagues. Had another decent game, 5 carries for 40 yards, and had a long touchdown reception, 1 catch for 70 yards and a touchdown this past week against the Jets. And look what James White just did against this Buffalo Bills team last week. That's Tariq Cohen coming up this week. He's a definite start for me here in week 9. All right, for the Bills, we have LaShawn McCoy and Chris Ivory. Now, I think we kind of saw it a little bit there on Monday Night Football, and I think it's going to be the same going forward. LaShawn McCoy is going to live and die fantasy point-wise based off of his pass-catching ability and how much volume he can get in the passing game. He had 12 carries for 13 yards. That's not going to cut it. However, he did add in another 6 catches for 82 yards, and that's where he needs to stay. They're not going to be able to run the ball in Buffalo, especially this week against one of the top run defenses in all of football in the Chicago Bears. Right now, they're only giving up on average 16.7 points per game. This past week against the Jets, only allowed 35 yards rushing. They're an elite run defense in Chicago. You can throw on them. You have a hard time running against them, and I'm not a fan of either one of these guys. Another reason I'm a little bit down on LaShawn McCoy this week, Chris Ivory is still involved. He had half the carries of LaShawn McCoy, only 6, but yet tripled the yardage that he had with 34. He's going to be somebody who's involved in this running game week in and week out. He can steal goal line touches if they can ever get to the goal line. And with Nathan Peterman under center, that's going to stack defenders in the box because they know that he's not going to be able to throw and beat them. They're going to be playing against the run again for the Chicago Bears, and it's not going to be a good week. I'm going to sit both LaShawn McCoy and Chris Ivory this week. I want nothing to do with either one of them. Bucks and Panthers are next, so you got Peyton Barber. Really don't need to talk about Ronald Jones much anymore. He has a strained hamstring, going to be limited if he even plays. Could be out multiple weeks, still waiting to hear back from reports. And finally, Ronald Jones didn't belong out there anyway. All the preseason hype by other people just led to his demise. People were expecting a lot more than what they got out of Ronald Jones, but it wasn't a good situation to begin with him there in Tampa Bay. So let's talk about Peyton Barber. Peyton Barber is somebody who over the past couple weeks has actually had some fantasy relevance. He's had double-digit points 2 out of the last 3 weeks, including 19 carries, 85 yards, and a touchdown this past week against the Bengals. Here's the problem. Jameis Winston's now gone, which is not a problem. Fitzmagic is back under center. The first 3 games of the season, when Ryan Fitzpatrick was the quarterback here of the Tampa Bay Bucks, the production for Peyton Barber just wasn't there. He only had a total of 110 yards through 3 games the first 3 weeks of the season. He was getting the touches, but he was highly inefficient with them. Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to throw the ball. It's like what he does. That's why they have him in there, to move the ball down the field. Tampa Bay is not a consistent producer in the run game, and now they get a pretty tough matchup against the Carolina Panthers, currently the 8th ranked defense against opposing running backs, giving up on average only 18.5 points per game. They just held the Baltimore Ravens to 61 yards rushing. They've only allowed over 100 yards rushing to opposing running backs twice through the first 8 weeks of the season. They're a solid run defense in Carolina, and I'm not going to start Peyton Barber this week. On the Carolina side of the football, we have Christian McCaffrey, and he's somebody who I received a lot of questions about last week. People want to know even if they should stick with him or even keep him in standard leagues. Yes, keep Christian McCaffrey. I understand that the rushing production is really not there right now, but he's getting the overall touches that is going to give you that opportunity at fantasy points every single week. This past week, he went up against one of the toughest run defenses in all of football, the Baltimore Ravens, had 14 carries, which is great. Only turned it into 45 yards, but one of those was a touchdown, and then added another 4 catches for 11 yards and a touchdown through the air. He's going to be somebody who's highly utilized in this offense, and there's not too many guys in the NFL out there at the running back position that are going to go out and get you close to 15 to 20 touches a week, almost guaranteed. McCaffrey is one of those guys, and now he gets the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the 23rd ranked defense against opposing running backs, who last week to the Cincinnati Bengals gave up 130 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. To opposing running backs, they're giving up almost 27 points a game. Christian McCaffrey, I don't care if it's standard or PPR, he's a start for me this week against the Tampa Bay Bucs. Chiefs and Browns are next. We'll start off with Kareem Hunt. He's currently the number 6 overall running back in all of fantasy football in PPR leagues. And if you got him, you're starting him. This is just one of those matchups, especially for the next couple weeks, that you can kind of just lick your chops because Kareem Hunt has great matchups and has that ability to go out there and put up big numbers every single week. He's a definite start again here in Week 9. Now for the soap opera that is the Cleveland Browns, we have Nick Chubb and Duke Johnson. Now, yes, I know Duke Johnson has been a total disappointment here the past couple weeks, and I own that one. The usage just isn't there for him. However, now the change in coaching staff comes, and I'm not giving up on Duke Johnson yet. Am I going to start him this week? No, I've learned my lesson over the past 2 weeks that Todd Haley does not like me and will not use him. But now Todd Haley is gone. Weird. Hugh Jackson is gone, thank God. But now what happens to this offense going forward? It's a question mark. I get a lot of questions. Are we buying or are we selling our Browns players? Hang on to them for right now. This is one of those situations where sometimes a coaching change just sparks a fire in a team and they come out and they're really, overly productive, at least for a few weeks until the newness runs out. Take advantage of it. Nick Chubb is somebody who's gotten 18 carries the past 2 straight weeks, and I like the potential of him getting that same amount of volume week in and week out. If there's one thing that makes me nervous about this game and the Cleveland Browns running backs, is that if Kansas City comes out and gets an early lead, they may abandon the run in Cleveland and rely solely on the pass for 2 to 3 quarters. If that's the case, Nick Chubb's upside is going to be limited. For that fact, I'm going to have him as a flex play start this week based off of possible volume with RB2 upside. Duke Johnson, I'm going to sit him for the week. I've expected more volume from him the past couple weeks, and it hasn't been there. Let's see how the new coaching staff, the new play calling uses him. I wouldn't drop him yet. Hang on to him one more week. Let's see how they utilize him, and if they don't, then we can cut him. But Nick Chubb's somebody I'm definitely hanging on to. Like I've said with the other guys, there's not too many running backs out there that go out there and get you close to 20 touches a week. You don't want to give up on Nick Chubb yet. He's got great matchups coming up the next 2 weeks with the Chiefs and the Falcons. He's a decent start, and I like Nick Chubb this week. Hopefully as a flex play, but he's got RB2 upside. Jets and Dolphins are next. We got Isaiah Crowell and Trenton Cannon, whose name came up a lot end of the week last week as somebody who could have a role in this offense. And he outscored Isaiah Crowell. However, if you're not in a PPR league, his upside is limited. Cannon only had 6 carries for 10 yards, added another 3 catches through the air. That's 7 catches over the past 2 weeks. He's somebody who's trying to take over that Bilal Powell role. Whenever Elijah McGuire comes back, that's kind of going to make Cannon and McGuire, hit and miss, and they're going to eat into each other's value. Isaiah Crowell is going to be somebody who's going to get the touches. He's going to get you double-digit touches each week. The problem is, which Isaiah Crowell are you going to get? You're going to get the one from week 5, where he had 15 carries for 219 yards, or you're going to get the Isaiah Crowell from week 7 and 8, where he couldn't top 29 yards rushing on double-digit attempts in either game. That's the problem you have with Isaiah Crowell. He does have a decent matchup, though, going up against the Miami Dolphins, currently the 29th ranked team against the run, giving up almost 29.5 points per game to opposing running backs. And look at what Lamar Miller did against this team last week. He actually looked good, and that was Lamar Miller. Listen, if you had a David Johnson, Joe Mixon, Saquon Barkley, one of these guys who's on a bye this week, it's good timing. If you want to roll the dice, Isaiah Crowell as an RB2 has upside this week. And if you're in a pinch looking for a bye week replacement, I would start Isaiah Crowell. On the Dolphins side of the football, we have Kenyon Drake and the first-round draft pick of the 1964 NFL Draft, Frank Gore. All right, he's not that old, but he's been around forever. And he deserves to still be around. This past week against the Texans, 12 carries, 53 yards. Continually sees decent volume. At this point, though, unless you're in one of these leagues that are, 12 teams or larger and you're looking for a flex play, I'm not going to start Frank Gore. It's just too inconsistent. And even though he's getting double-digit carries, this isn't exactly an offense that spends a lot of time in the red zone. Therefore, limiting his touchdown upside, he still doesn't have a touchdown here on the season on the ground. He's going to be a sit for me, like I said, unless you're in one of these deeper leagues. Kenyon Drake is somebody who I was off this bandwagon in the preseason just because they couldn't commit to the guy. It was never his talent. It was the commitment of the Miami Dolphins. However, the past 2 weeks, he's really started to turn things on. He only had 12 carries, but had 58 yards and a touchdown on the ground. He's now had double-digit points 3 out of the last 4 weeks. He's been involved in the passing game. This past week, another 2 catches, 37 yards and a touchdown. He's starting to turn things on, similar to what we saw last year, which we expected. He just needs to get the touches. They need to commit to this guy, to getting him close to 20 touches a week. They have a decent matchup this week. They're going up against the 18th ranked run defense of the New York Jets, giving up on average 24 points per game. Last week against the Chicago Bears, 121 yards and a touchdown on the ground. They've allowed over 100 yards rushing 3 out of the last 6 weeks. This is a team that can be had on the ground, and I'm going to start Kenyon Drake here in Week 9. Steelers and Ravens are next. So for the Steelers, we have James Conner because, Le'Veon Bell's still not there. But do they really need Le'Veon Bell? Look what James Conner is doing. Had over 200 total yards from scrimmage this past week against the Cleveland Browns. 146 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Added in another 66 yards on 5 receptions through the air. The kid is playing great. He's had over 28 fantasy points 3 straight weeks in PPR leagues. Now they get the top-ranked run defense in the Baltimore Ravens. However, 2 straight weeks now the Ravens have allowed a touchdown on the ground. They've only allowed over 100 yards twice so far this year. So I'm limiting expectations somewhat on James Conner, but if you have him, you're starting him because the Steelers are committed to him, and he's somebody who could get you close to 30 touches in a week. He's got that kind of upside, and he's playing great. If you have James Conner, he's still a must-start regardless of the matchup this week. For the Ravens, we'll talk about Alex Collins and Uncle Buck Allen. Buck Allen's somebody who I'm going to sit this week. He's strictly touchdown dependent. He's not getting the volume as of right now to be somebody that you can throw in there and be solid week in and week out. Alex Collins, once again, had a touchdown on the ground here this past week. 11 carries, 49 yards in that touchdown. Now has 3 touchdowns over his past 3 games. However, has yet to get more than 68 yards rushing in a game, which is somewhat, irritating to his owners. He doesn't have that high ceiling like we expected him to have. However, it was about this point last season where he really started to turn it on. It's something where we need to monitor him. It's a tough matchup this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are the second-ranked team against the run, giving up only 15.5 points per game. This past week against the Browns, limited to 65 yards rushing. They've only allowed 100 yards rushing to opposing running backs once this entire season. That was back in Week 1 against those same Cleveland Browns. This is a tough matchup for Alex Collins. If you have him and you have somebody that's on bye, he's somebody who's a flex play with RB2 upside, but he's not somebody that has that really high ceiling that you look for week in and week out. Listen, like I said, there's a lot of buys this week. There's some injuries out there to worry about. Alex Collins is a decent play, but I'm not having, this huge expectation for Alex Collins here in Week 9. He's nothing more than a bye week fill-in for me at this point. Lions and Vikings are next, so Kerryon Johnson's who we're going to talk about for the Lions, and this guy is a must-start almost every single week, regardless of his matchup. And yes, I know he gets a tough Minnesota defense this week. However, even though he had a down week in Week 8, where he only had 8 carries for 22 yards, he still ended up with 14 fantasy points in PPR leagues. That now gives him double digits every single game he's played in this year, with the exception of Week 1. He's somebody we have to have in our lineups. Part of the reason he wasn't utilized as much here in Week 8, the Seattle Seahawks came out and jumped out to a big lead, and it forced the Lions to abandon the run. But however, Kerryon Johnson is going to be involved in that passing game as long as Theo Riddick is out. He's somebody with a super high ceiling. He's a safe play, and I am all aboard the Kerryon Johnson bandwagon, and he's a start for me here in Week 9. For the Vikings, we have Latavius Murray and Dalvin Cook. Now, if I had to guess, once again, I don't see Dalvin Cook coming back until after the Week 10 bye, possibly in Week 11. Something we still need to monitor throughout the week. He hasn't had any setbacks, but he hasn't exactly progressed to being ready for game action yet. I think they're trying to take it easy. especially with as productive as Latavius Murray has been. He's looked great in his opportunity. This past week against one of the toughest run defenses in all of football, he had 13 carries, 56 yards, and a touchdown for the Minnesota Vikings to add to another 5 receptions for 39 yards, which is something we really don't expect from Latavius Murray, that pass-catching ability, but they're starting to utilize him in that way, and as long as Dalvin Cook is out, especially in a week like this where they're going up against the 26th ranked run defense in the Detroit Lions, who just gave up 139 yards rushing and a touchdown to the Seattle Seahawks, I'm definitely going to start Latavius Murray this week. Like I said, I don't expect Dalvin Cook to play. Now, if for some crazy circumstance he does play, that really limits the upside of Latavius Murray, and at that point, it's really a crapshoot. If he does play, he will be limited, but like I said, I expect it to be at week 11 before we see Dalvin Cook. If they're smart, that's what they do. Rest him, let him get to be 100%, and then bring him back. No reason to rush him back now while Latavius Murray is being so productive. I'm going to start Latavius Murray this week, I think, with the matchup and his pass production here over the past few weeks, which has seen him get double-digit points 3 straight weeks, no less than 19 points in PPR leagues. He's a start for me here again in Week 9. Falcons and Redskins are next. So we'll start off with the Falcons and Tevin Coleman and Ito Smith. Tevin Coleman has been very, very disappointing, up until this point. As soon as Devontae Freeman went out, we expected big things from Tevin Coleman, but we haven't really gotten a return on that yet. They are coming off the bye week, but the game before the bye week, 11 carries, 50 yards, and a touchdown. It was his best game that he's had, fantasy points scoring-wise all season, where he had 16 points. Yes, he's somebody that's going to go out there and get you close to 10 points a game. Right now, averaging 11 points per game overall for the season in PPR leagues. But there's just something there that's limiting him. And Ito Smith is part of the problem. He's stolen a lot of the touchdowns that could have went Tevin Coleman's way, that would have made Tevin Coleman a lot more of a commodity than he really is. Ito Smith has 3 touchdowns in his past 4 games. He hasn't overly been efficient either, though. The game before the bye, 7 carries for 16 yards. The part that worries me about this is they could start giving Ito Smith a little bit more of an opportunity to see what they have in him. See if he's somebody that could be this solid backup to Devontae Freeman in the future. Is it something where maybe they want to keep Tevin Coleman because they don't believe in Ito Smith? Whatever it is, there's other possibilities there. I can see Ito Smith getting close to 10 touches a game, and if he steals the touchdown, it's going to make Coleman ineffective. At this point, with all the bye weeks, I'm still starting Tevin Coleman. He's a starting running back in the NFL, and he deserves to be started. He's more of a high-end flex, low-end RB2 at this point. Ito Smith is somebody who is really relegated to deeper leagues. If your 12 teams are larger and you're hurting because of bye weeks or injuries, he's a flex play for this week. It's a tough matchup, though. They get the 9th-ranked defense of the Washington Redskins. They're very overlooked in Washington because as a whole, the team isn't very successful, but the defense is pretty solid. They've only allowed over 100 yards rushing to an opponent, running backs one time all year. That was back in Week 2 to the Indianapolis Colts. Haven't allowed a rushing touchdown to an opposing running back since Week 5, and that was against the New Orleans Saints. This is a team who's very solid on the ground. It's a tough matchup, but I do like the offense in Atlanta. I'll start Tevin Coleman, and I'm only going with Ito Smith if you're in one of these 12-team or larger leagues looking for a flex play, due to buys. Apparently, we found the fountain of youth, and it's somewhere around the Washington Redskins Stadium, and Adrian Peterson has found it. What has gotten into Adrian Peterson this past week? 26 carries for $149 and a touchdown on the ground, and another 1 catch for 7 yards and a touchdown through the air. Adrian Peterson looks totally rejuvenated. He looks like he still has something to prove, and he's playing great behind a solid offensive line in Washington. He's getting you over 20 touches a week. Very few running backs that are going to get you that production. He is somewhat touchdown dependent to have that big week. He's somebody who needs a lot of volume. He's not somebody that can go out there and get you 10 carries and put up a big game for you. He needs the volume. He has that ability to break the big play, and now he gets the worst-ranked defense against the opposing running backs in the Atlanta Falcons, giving up over 31 points per game to opposing running backs. This past 2 weeks ago before their bye against the New York Giants, they only allowed 45 yards rushing and a touchdown, but they were able to be had through the air. This is something where we need to monitor the status of Chris Thompson. Now he has a rib injury on the other side. It's really going to depend if he can play due to his pain tolerance. How much can he really take? I expect a lot of Adrian Peterson here in the coming weeks. He's got a few decent matchups coming up, and he is by far a must-start for me here in Week 9. Texans and Broncos are next. For the Texans, we got Lamar Miller. And I don't know if Lamar Miller started reading reports that Donta Foreman was getting close or what, but he's all of a sudden turned into a legit RB1. But can it last? I'm not so sure to say that. This past week against the Miami Dolphins, 18 carries, 133 yards, and a touchdown. That's 2 straight weeks now, over 100 yards for Lamar Miller. It's something we haven't really seen a whole lot from him. They've been utilizing him a lot more on the ground. He's averaged 20 carries the past 2 games. Now he gets to go up against the 27th ranked run defense in the Denver Broncos, who have gotten better the past 2 weeks. Listen, weeks 4 through 6, they were giving up over 200 yards a game. These past 2 weeks, though, they haven't given up any more than 50 yards rushing, no touchdowns on the ground to opposing running backs. They are improved there in Denver. Now, does that mean that we don't want to start Lamar Miller? You kind of want to ride the hot hand here. As long as Lamar Miller is producing, he's in an offense that now could be with Demaryius Thomas if that trade is finalized. That would give them, DeAndre Hopkins, Demaryius Thomas on the outside, pulling some of those defenders out of the box and making it a little bit easier for Lamar Miller. If that happens, he's a definite start for me this week. Ride the hot hand while you can. You never know how long it's going to last. Donta Foreman's right around the corner. Lamar Miller may just be trying to keep his job and has that little bit of added motivation. I will start Lamar Miller here in week 9. On the Broncos side of the football, you have Phillip Lindsay and Devontae Booker. Booker, of who I'm really not too interested in this week, had a decent game, ran pretty well against the Kansas City Chiefs, had 9 carries for 78 yards to add in another 4 catches, 23 yards through the air, 14 fantasy points in PPR leagues, which isn't bad. But that was against a Kansas City run defense, which is nowhere near the talent of a Houston Texan run defense, who is currently ranked 13th against opposing running backs, giving up on average only 22 points a game. This past week, they gave up 116 yards rushing and a touchdown to the Miami Dolphins. But they are an improved defense. They've only allowed 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground all year long to opposing running backs. Solid defense in Houston. Phillip Lindsay is who I want to start in this offense, especially if they do finalize the trade for Demaryius Thomas. If that happens, that's only going to give more work to Phillip Lindsay, who's been somebody who's scored double-digit fantasy points every single week this season, with the exception of week 3 against the Baltimore Ravens. He's had touchdowns the 2 past weeks on the ground. He's somebody who's going to be utilized a lot in this offense, going to get you close to that 15 to 18, possibly even 20 touches a game. He runs hard. He's exciting to watch, and he looks like he wants this job. He's out there giving it everything he has, and the Denver Broncos are starting to reward him with more work because of it. He is a definite start, solid RB2 with upside this week for me for Phillip Lindsay. Chargers and Seahawks are next, and we have all the Melvin Gordon owners going like this because they're hoping he plays. This hamstring injury is going to be something that really irritates owners this week. I have a feeling he did miss their last game before the bye week. Hasn't played since week 6. Hopefully the bye week was enough to get him healed. However, it's something we need to monitor. Watch his practice participation through the week. If he does play, if he's a full go by week's end, he's an obvious must start. If he's limited, if he's a game time decision, we need to temper expectations a little bit, because with a hamstring injury, the last thing they're going to want to do is go out there and push the workload on him and possibly turn this into an injury, kind of like we've seen with some of these other running backs and their hamstrings that just take a long time to get going, kind of like Dalvin Cook. They don't want that to happen in LA. If there's any threat of him re-injuring it or making it worse, they're going to sit Melvin Gordon. But let's just pay attention to the practice reports. Keep our fingers crossed. If he starts, he plays. Austin Eckler, though, on the other side, is somebody who was kind of disappointing in the week that Melvin Gordon didn't play. Had 12 carries for 42 yards, but wasn't really as involved overall. Did add another 5 catches for 26, but he's somebody who's going to get the volume if Melvin Gordon sits. And regardless of that, is somebody who is a very solid flex play week to week. They do have the Seattle Seahawks defense this week, which is very much improved. They've only allowed rushing touchdowns in 2 games all season. That was back in weeks 4 and 5. This past week against the Lions, only allowed 25 yards rushing. 2 weeks before that, before their bye week to the Oakland Raiders, only allowed 48 yards rushing. There's a very solid defense in Seattle. They don't get a whole lot of credit. It's a tough matchup. However, if Gordon sits, Eckler's a start. If Gordon plays, he's an obvious start, and Austin Eckler becomes one of those bye week fill-in flex plays at best. They're both involved in their team's offense. You don't really want to sit either one of these guys. Even coming off the bye week, Austin Eckler is still the 19th ranked running back in PPR leagues. He has value regardless. But yeah, these are guys you want to have in your lineup if possible. For the Seahawks, we're going to talk about Chris Carson, because really he's their number one guy right now in that backfield. He just had week 8, 25 carries, 105 yards, and a touchdown. That now gives him more than 14 carries, 4 out of his last 5 weeks. He's somebody who's highly involved in this offense. The running game has been more productive than a lot of people, including myself, had originally thought. And if we're going to have somebody out there getting close to 20 touches a game with the upside that touchdown upside with Russell Wilson being able to move the ball now with the likes of Tyler Lockett, David Moore, Doug Baldwin, he's got options now. And if they can get him down there inside the red zone and on the goal line, Chris Carson's going to be the guy that's going to capitalize on it. They do have a tough matchup, somewhat. The Chargers are the 15th ranked defense against opposing running backs. 2 weeks ago, before their bye against the Titans, they gave up 126 yards rushing and a touchdown, which is by far the most they've given up point-wise all season long. They did have the bye week. They're coming off the bye. They've had a week to prepare for this game. It is a tough matchup, but it's being played in Seattle, and crazy things happen when the Seattle Seahawks are at home. They play on another level. Chris Carson, with all these bye weeks, is going to be a start for me here in Week 9. Rams and Saints are next, and this game should be fun to watch. And everybody who's out there hating on Todd Gurley for taking a dive there on the 3-4 yard line to run the clock out, just look at it this way. The guy had 33 fantasy points coming into that play in PPR leagues, and even though you may have needed that touchdown to win your matchup, you would have been nowhere near close to that win had he not already scored you over 30 points. Don't hate on Todd Gurley. The guy's averaging 30.5 points per game. He's a definite must-start. I don't care who he's playing. Love me some Todd Gurley. He's by far right now the number 1 running back in all of fantasy football. On the Saints side of the football, you have Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. Now, Kamara is going to be a must-start, obviously. I don't care format, league size. You start Alvin Kamara. The question usually comes in with what do we do with Mark Ingram? Is he somebody that we start week in and week out? And that one's a little bit more iffy. Now, he is a flex play start for me this week in Week 9. He's somebody who has the upside. He's going to get double-digit touches, slightly involved in the passing game, going to be playing at home where the Saints play better than on the road. He's going to be involved, and he's always got that touchdown upside. Drew Brees has plenty of weapons to get him down there inside the red zone. It really just depends on if it's Kamara or Ingram that get the touches. I have Ingram starting this week as a flex play only, basically because all these bye week players. You possibly had the Clements, Wendell Don't Tell Me I Have Smallwoods, the Barkleys, the Max, the Mixons, the David Johnsons. There's some holes out there to be filled, and I will start Mark Ingram, despite his matchup against the Los Angeles Rams here this week. In what could be the game of the week, we have the Packers at the Patriots, Sunday Night Football. For the Packers, Aaron Jones. Now, 2 weeks ago, I said we needed to buy low on Aaron Jones. I put it out in a video. Hopefully you guys watched it, and hopefully you followed it, because what happened here first week after the bye week, they gave him 12 carries, which isn't as much as he needs, but he was still effective with it. Had 86 yards and a touchdown. Looked great. Looked explosive. This is going to start to be the breakout of Aaron Jones. They need to use him a little bit more. One thing I didn't like seeing, they had a goal line carry that went to Jamal Williams. That's just Mike McCarthy, giving us all here in the fantasy football community the virtual finger, if you could say, because that's going to be something that happens, kind of similar to the whole Garrett Blount and Kerryon Johnson. It's just going to be something that happens. It may make more football sense than fantasy football sense, and it's something we have to deal with. Now they get the New England Patriots, which isn't a bad run defense. You can see how they limited the Bills, but then again, that's the Bills. They are the 17th ranked run defense to opposing running backs, giving up on average 23.5 points per game. Like I said, against those Bills, they only gave up 47 yards on the ground, only allowed more than 100 yards rushing twice this season, and only 2 rushing touchdowns so far this year to opposing running backs. They're a solid run D for New England, but I am going to start Aaron Jones. This is an Aaron Rodgers-led offense, and as long as Aaron Rodgers is under center, the defense has to respect the pass. That's going to pull defenders out of the box, and it's going to give Aaron Jones more opportunities. He's going to be a start for me here in Week 9. For the Patriots, we have James White and maybe Sony Michel, but I'm not going to count on it. Yes, he had a limited practice Saturday before the Monday night game, but I'm not so sure that he's going to all of a sudden miraculously recover enough to come out there and be ready here Week 9. As of right now, at the time of this recording, which is on Monday afternoon, I'm not going to think that Sony Michel is going to start, so therefore I'm really not going to give him a designation. By all means, if he's a full go by week's end, he's a start in that offense. I'm focusing more on James White. James White right now is the number 5 1, 2, 3, 4 people in front of him, and that's it in PPR leagues. James White is averaging over 20 points per game so far this season. He is somebody who is highly involved in this offense. Yes, only had 8 carries for 15 yards. Not impressive. Did have a touchdown on the ground, though. Where he makes his money for you in fantasy football is he had 10 receptions for 79 yards. And there was another play in there where he had a chance at another receiving touchdown that Brady basically threw at his feet. This is something where James White comes out week in, week out, has that huge upside, especially being that he's one of Tom Brady's favorite targets. Now they get the Green Bay Packers. This could be a game full of offense going back and forth. The Packers, on average, give up 22 points to opposing running backs. Todd Gurley just had a great day against them, but then again, Todd Gurley has a great day against everybody. Back in Week 6, the San Francisco 49ers, they even ran for 148 yards against these Green Bay Packers. You do not want to sit James White by any means. For a long time there, we would always say he's a solid flex play. That's no longer the truth. Now he's a high-end, super high-end RB2, low-end RB1, week in, week out, especially while Sony Michel is not playing. In what could be one of the most boringest games ever on Monday Night Football, we have the Tennessee Titans and the Dallas Cowboys. For the Titans, we have Dion Lewis and Derrick Henry. Now, for Dion Lewis, he had a decent game before their bye week last week against the Los Angeles Chargers, Week 7, 13 carries for 91 yards, and then added another 6 receptions for 64 yards. If you need a flex play, especially in PPR leagues, he's a decent play this week against the Dallas Cowboys. Derrick Henry, though, not quite yet. Had a good week-ish, Week 7 against the Chargers, 12 carries, 33 yards, but also had that touchdown. But he's somebody we need to pay attention to. And I know a lot of you guys have lost faith in Derrick Henry, and I'm not going to start Derrick Henry this week. But if he starts to trend up, it would not surprise me in the least bit that over this past week, over the bye week, they tried to develop a way to get him more involved. They need to establish a running game in Tennessee to have any chance at winning games here down the stretch. Derrick Henry, needs to be that guy. If he starts to trend upwards, grab him if he's available on your waiver wire. You never know. He could be somebody who they get going here second half of the year and can provide some value for you second half of the season. But no, as far as Week 9 goes, I'm not starting Derrick Henry. I'm just starting to watch him a little bit closer. For the Cowboys, you have Zeke Elliott, and if you have him, you're obviously starting him right now. Even though he's coming off his bye week, he's still the number 10 fantasy running back. He's averaging over 17 points a game. It is a tougher matchup against the Tennessee Titans, but hopefully Amari Cooper can get things going for the Dallas Cowboys, pull some of those defenders out of the box, and give Zeke Elliott more opportunity. He's somebody who's going to go out there and get you 20 touches a week, and now they're starting to utilize him more and more in the passing game as the season progresses. If you have him, you're starting him, no questions asked. All right, those are the running back matchups here for Week 9. If I didn't cover somebody on your team, I have no idea who's on your team because I touched all the main running backs in every single matchup. Really appreciate the support. Channel's still growing. Trying to help you guys get some wins here down the stretch. If you have other questions, we have a community full of over 26,000 people trying to help each other out. Nothing but positive comments and questions over here. Well, I really appreciate the support from you guys. Looking forward to talking to you here later in the week. There's a chance that I do a live show Sunday morning right around 10 a.m. Eastern, 10 to 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Trying to finalize those details. Make sure you're checking on YouTube. I can actually put posts in YouTube now and let you guys know what's coming up. As soon as I finalize that date and time, I'm going to let you know. But it's either going to be Saturday or Sunday. Live shows coming. End of the week like usual. Looking forward to talking to you guys, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks. Have a good one. Bye.